Hello, welcome to another episode of Livestream Insiders, episode 132, updates to Facebook, updates to Periscope. We've got a happy birthday, we've got a couple of fantastic case studies for you on the way, all in the next 30 minutes of our lives together, and we'll start that clock ticking up now for 30 minutes from the last 7 days with me, Peter Stewart, and also, of course, Krishna Day.
To be back, Peter. It's been another busy week. I know that you've been busy, I've been busy, and the world of live video has been busy. So thank you everybody for joining us here live. If you've not been with us before, we are together the Livestream Insiders, and we are passionate about live streaming, be that live audio or live video, to help you with your communications. A little bit of background in terms of if you're new to us. Our goal here is to share with you the latest news, tools, technologies, case studies, and hopefully some inspiration to help you integrate live video into your communications. That could be for social selling, it could be for marketing, employee engagement, or even crisis communications. Peter's bringing with him all of his journalistic experience, decades of that, and I bring with me my decades of marketing and digital communications, and also communications generally within larger organizations. I'm going to pass it back to Peter now. I'm going to be watching out in the comments. Thank you so much for those of you joining us live, those of you who are on the replay, and also those of you who are sharing our content. We really, really appreciate it in terms of sharing this tools and, as I said, technologies and the news for the week. Peter's going to give you a heads up now of what's coming up on today's show.
As we say, case studies are on the way. They always seem to be ones which are maybe outside of the box, maybe a little bit different, but the idea is, of course, that you can merge them with some of the ideas you've already got from your particular area. But let's start, in case you missed it, those details about Facebook Live and some changes which were announced this week. As I say, ICYMI. There's been a lot of talk about them, and I expect that Krishna will want to chip in a couple of times on some of these as well, because they're really kind of interesting things for us to be talking about this week. And three main updates which have been announced at the F8 conference during the course of the week. So first of all, we're going to be talking about, well, persistent stream keys, the live cross-posting, and also the live rewind as well. So let's talk about each of those in order, and we'll start off with those persistent stream keys. So they're going to be able to really speed up the whole process of going live for you. And what's particularly interesting is that you're only going to have one stream key, and you're going to be able to share that across all of your production team. So that key is going to be permanent for you. So that's going to be really, really useful. So it's going to be easier to set up in advance for everyone to share. It's going to cut back on that kind of perhaps a last minute scramble, sharing things, making sure that everyone has got all of those details. So that's going to be really, really useful. Now, of course, Krishna, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that if you've been broadcasting on Ecamm or BeLive or some of these other third-party tools, they already handle the stream keys for you, don't you? So all that's already been kind of taken care of, as I say, if you use these third-party platforms, yeah?
In fact, you're right. So you'd actually be able to grab the stream key. However, the key difference here is you're going to have a persistent one. So the benefit here is you don't have to actually gather a new stream key for every different stream that you've been using. And so, as you said, though, on some platforms, that they would actually, like the tool that we're using now, we actually don't have to remember the stream key. We just actually hit the go live button. So there's some tools that have had that integration, and others where you've actually had to get the code specifically for that stream. So it depends on the platform you're using.
Absolutely. So this is going to really help publishers and video creators who use the live API but aren't actually going through those other platforms. That's number one. Number two is the live cross-posting feature. Now, again, this is going to be really, really useful. So that means that your live video, if you do it from a desktop, you're going to be able to share it to another page. In fact, several other pages. Why is that useful? Well, it may be that you want to get your message out to several different pages that you own. It may also be useful that if you are the producer of a page, but actually maybe you're doing it from home, or maybe you want to push it out to another particular platform, which is much, much bigger than yours, not necessarily on the same kind of level. It's also going to be useful and interesting if you've got a guest. So you can utilize their follower count as well. We'll come to that in a few moments' time. So it's going to be particularly useful. As I say, it's only particularly on desktop at the moment, and you'll find this tool on the Facebook's Publisher Tools section on your pages. But also, which is really useful, is that all of that information, all of your viewers are going to be aggregated on the main first page that you actually are broadcasting from. Now, there are a few kind of pros and cons for all of those. Well, let's talk about the pros first of all. As I say, the aggregation of those statistics are going to be really useful for you, all on the originator, all on the original page. The live video view account will appear on all of those separate pages, so that's going to make you look perhaps even more popular than kind of really you are, because that's going to be the aggregate number. And you can also build up your relationship pages, your relationship with those pages that produce high quality content. Now, a lot of this information, particularly on these pros and cons, I've been taking from the Lights Camera live.com page, which has been put together by Stephanie Liu. So she's been putting together some really interesting thoughts on how these are actually going to be working. So those are the pros. Some of the cons, well, first of all, you're not going to be able to see all the comments, the reactions and so on the originator page. So presuming that you're actually broadcasting and you're looking at the originator page yourself, you're going to have to keep a weather eye open, perhaps with some separate devices, on the comments which are appearing for your particular stream, but actually they will be native to those other separate pages. So that's going to be a little bit awkward for you to actually be able to manage. So perhaps it is that you're going to be able to employ some kind of producer who can monitor those and then feed you those kind of useful comments from those other particular sources. And as I say, live video from mobile devices can't be cross-posted. Now, that's a bit of a problem for me in the role that I have, because very often I'm actually out in the field with a mobile phone, and very often I need to cross-post to other pages. Where I am, sometimes geographical borders, or sometimes different interests, means that it would be super useful to be able to share all of that information from my original post on a mobile phone to other pages. Doesn't seem as though that's going to be likely, at least not in the short term. So that's number one and number two. The third feature, still in beta at the moment, not rolling out at the moment, but again, it's going to be useful, kind of minor compared to the other two, and that is the live rewind feature. So it's still, as I say, in its testing page at the moment, and that means that anyone that joins after you've started your live stream will be able to scroll back to the beginning and will be able to watch it from the start. It also means that if something happens, for example, I don't know, if my new backboard falls down all of a sudden, you'll be able to scroll back and see that happen all over again. So if you've ever been in the situation where people have started watching a stream, perhaps after 5 minutes or so, and maybe they've commented, I've missed it, I'll tell you what, I've missed the start, I'll stop watching now and I'll start the replay and I'll watch that later on at some other time. That's a bit of a shame, because first of all, they may never get round to it, and secondly, of course, you're missing out on that live engagement, on those comments and on those reactions as well. So this is going to be really useful. It strikes me that it's a little bit similar to what Periscope brought out a while ago. They don't have a live rewind feature at the moment, but what they do have is the feature which enables you to be able to share the live video, but from a certain point that has just happened. So what you're able to do on Periscope, we mentioned it at the time about a month, 6 weeks ago, is that when you tap those three buttons which appear at the bottom of the screen and share the video, you can share that live stream from the point which has just happened. And another point, actually, Krishna, it occurs to me that it'll save perhaps for always answering those comments which inevitably appear midway through a stream. Where are you? Who are you? What are you talking about? What's going on? Can you repeat that information again? No need for all of that, because people will just have to rewind and start it from the beginning. It also strikes me that if you're really canny and really clever as a presenter or maybe as a producer, you may be able to point people to points in the broadcast that they've missed. For example, to be able to look at your clock and say, I started my first point at 2 minutes 32 into this broadcast. There was a fantastic piece where my guest mentioned free donuts for everybody at 5 minutes 23 into the broadcast. You may be able to scroll back and get the discount codes that I mentioned at 17 minutes and 45 seconds into the broadcast. So there, it could be really, really useful. So in case you missed them, our take here from Livestream Insiders on those three main points which are announced during the course of the week, and that is that the key, the live rewind, and also the live cross-posting feature as well.
So we should say, Peter, we were the first to talk about cross-posting.
Absolutely, yes,
weeks
indeed.
and weeks ago. And we've had that feature accessible to us, and we've been using Blue Jeans to be able to do it, and we've even done video tutorials about it. So it was really interesting that it took them till now to be able to announce it. And certainly our experience, in fact, that's why I've got two devices at my side. I'm watching comments there in terms of where we cross-post it to. There's certainly lots of learnings from it. I think it would be great for when you're actually partnering people. Let's say you're working with influencers, obviously be compliant with the branded content guidelines there in terms of doing that. The other thing, though, I had a different point of view, Peter, to you in terms of those comments coming in when people are doing the live rewind, because we don't have access to that at the moment. But I think it could be confusing for people because they will be probably asking more questions. So it's even more of a reason for you to have a co-host or a video producer with you to be able to watch those comments, or actually have something ready to, like, for example, I'm able to post comments directly on desktop here with this integration with the tool that we're using today. And therefore you can actually watch the comments and then say to people, here it is again. So you might have them ready to go or cut and paste to be able to actually replace in there, because people could be coming in and it's going back, as you said, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, even an hour on some content. So I do think it raises the point of actually even more important to have a producer.
And I'm wondering, I'm presuming, I haven't actually heard about this, but I'm presuming you won't be able to post comments after you've rewound. Because, or at least, even if you do, that'll be pinned to the point in the broadcast that you were watching when you made that comment, rather than appearing in the live stream, which may be 10 minutes in the future. Do you see what I mean? Because obviously that will.
But who knows? I guess the question is who knows, because when you're watching a replay, your comment goes against that time slot, and then you can see live comments at that time slot. So until we test it, guys, we can't tell you. If you get access to live rewind, in the next week, let us know. We'd love to know what your experience is. But I have to say, we broke that news because we saw access to cross-posting, and we actually, I think, were one of the first to talk about it. But that's what we're about, Peter, isn't it?
Which is why we're called Livestream Insiders, isn't it?
I'm going to move on to three very quick pieces in terms of news, and then we've got a great case study coming up for you a little later on in a sector that we've talked about a few times, as Peter was talking about. So the first one that we've actually got for you here as a story is about Watch. You might recall we were talking about Facebook Watch, so quite a bit of Facebook news as usual again this week. And Facebook Watch, those shows, we've actually talked about them several times over, where Facebook's been working with content creators and kind of publishing companies in terms of their content. So we know that when Facebook started off, and you might recall this in terms of when Facebook first started using Facebook Live, they had a lot of partnerships around actually doing Facebook Lives. And if you go back in our archives, be it here on Facebook at Facebook.com/Livestream Insiders, or you go back to our archives on YouTube as well, you'll have seen that we would have talked about actually the amount of money that was invested and then what happened, a year on from Facebook Live being available. Well, we've got some similar things going on now, I think, from my perspective, in terms of with the watch shows. And so this was an article that was on Digiday. All of the links for the content that we share will be available at the end of the show. So you don't need to go hunting around for it. But this was a story that's come up this week about what are the proposed budgets now for watch news shows. So just as Facebook was supporting organizations creating Facebook Lives in the first place, big brands and publishers, they're actually now obviously looking to see, well, how do we work with people in terms of watch shows? And that budget actually ranges between 1 million to 10 million US dollars. So as I said, this was reported in Digiday. For now, Facebook has actually committed to fund news programming for a year. So again, very similar to what they did for Facebook Live. Why are we flagging this to you? Because we know that some of you are actually in agencies or you're in big brands and you're working with organizations or for your own organization to be able to produce content. So you might be thinking about, how do we actually, explore Facebook Watch in terms of this? So they've actually committed, and generally the budgets are between 5 million and 10 million, according to the article in Digiday. However, they're willing to pay between 1 and 2 million for weekly shows. So they initially wanted to have daily shows, and the key thing there is, as well as I do, it is really tough to put high quality content out, which is what's required of Facebook Watch on a daily business. Those organizations who are doing that, they're typically media production organizations, and they've scaled up and they've got a team of people supporting that whole kind of infrastructure of live content, wherever it might be. It might be on Facebook, it might be on their own platforms and so on. And Peter comes from a broadcast background where, their kind of archive is full of recorded live content through the news, because they're a news organization. Of course, they do a lot more than news. And so that's a huge skill. It's a huge talent that's required to be able to do that. And also great editorial skills and great ideas for that content. But they've actually realized that that's more difficult for people to create. That's why they've now introduced this other budget. And they said, shows are set to debut from sometime this summer. Facebook Watch News Initiative is led by the platform's head of news partnerships and who's armed with a $90 million budget aimed at shows that create content with featured, well-known news anchors and journalists. And that was from a report that was done in the New York Times. So interesting that we were initially seeing that it was going to Facebook Watch was going to be around daily shows. And Facebook realised now that actually that's not always possible for producers to be able to create that, in terms of publications to be able to do that, and news organisations to do that, because of all sorts of reasons. And so it'll be interesting to see the organisations who start to do weekly shows. Let's take a look at two other comments. And I really appreciate those of you who are joining us here live on the Livestream Insiders page, or wherever you see this. Maybe you're watching this as a replay on YouTube, maybe you're watching as a replay elsewhere, maybe even on Pinterest. Who knows? We really appreciate you being here. Okay, so this next couple of months, and I actually was just looking back, and some of you might have actually been using social media for a long time, as I have. And so, the tools that we've had over the years have changed a lot. But I looked back in terms of, it was about a decade now. I don't know if you remember it. And in fact, there was another organization that I just cannot remember the name of. But there was an organization called 12 Seconds TV. Do you remember that? That was kind of publishing video content, live content, in terms of on, Twitter, for just 12 seconds. That was way before the days that actually we had Twitter video natively available to us. What's really interesting to me is that I saw something this week, And what I saw this week, if you follow me on Twitter or you follow me on Google Plus, you might have seen this. It was an app. And, 12 Seconds TV was actually, unfortunately, put to bed about a couple of years later because they didn't get the investment that they needed to continue. But now there's a new app that's actually come up, and that new app is available on your iPhone, and it's called 30 app. So what you can do now with 30 app is have 30 seconds messages. So yes, in that interim time, after we saw 12 Seconds TV, we've had native video in terms of on Twitter, we've had Periscope available to us, we've had Facebook Live, we've got lots of iterations of YouTube Live and Hangouts on Air as was. But what's interesting in terms of how long would you need for a chat? And it did get me wondering, would my kids potentially use this? Because they've got so many other tools that are available to them. They could be Snapchatting their friends or doing Instagram live video or whatever it might be, or actually recorded video. But this is a live chat that you actually can have, and it's just 30 seconds. I wonder, is it going to irritate people like the Facebook poke, which actually had a resurgence earlier on this year? Would you use an app to be able to just do a 30-second live video chat? I'm not sure it's actually one that I'd actually download onto my phone. I think I'm the wrong demographic. But what about you? Would you actually be using that? As I said, if you're interested in having a look at it, it's called 30 app, and you'll find it on the App Store. I could find it in the Irish iPhone App Store. And my last story that I've got for you now is something in terms of those of you who know Peter and I will know that this is how we met. We met initially on Periscope. I know some people say they have dating apps and Facebook's going to have their own dating app soon. Actually, we didn't need that, did we, Peter? We don't actually date, I have to say. If my husband's watching, no, this is just once a week, Brian. I'm with Peter, as you know. Anyway, but we actually met. We didn't need any dating apps. We just got together through Periscope, and we love sharing Periscope news and Twitter live video news. So here's one that actually came up. You might have seen this in your app updates. Every day I've got app updates to do on my phone, and this is one that we saw this week. And it's the fact that long time coming, great that it's here, but it's been really irritating that you actually couldn't scroll back and see all of the chat on Periscope. I'm wondering why it took them so long to implement this. But now, if you want to, a bit like we were talking about in terms of your live replays, in terms of on Facebook Live that's coming, now you can actually scroll back in terms of seeing the other comments there on Periscope. So if you're an avid Periscope user, then make sure you check out and update your app to the latest edition. That's it for me for the 3 tech updates. I'll be back a little later on with another story.
We love the case studies here on Livestream Insiders, and we always say, it's not necessarily going to be the area, the niche that you're involved with, but the ideas are often very, very much stealable. And this is one of the best case studies I think we've had for a very long time, as Krishna was suggesting a few moments ago. It's from the pharmaceutical world. It's from a branded drug company, and they've been very good at talking to MMM online. Me neither. MMM online, and talking through what it is they did and why they did it and what the results were, which is really good for this drugs company to have shared that kind of information. So Novacure is the company we're talking about, and they decided to go into a Facebook Live for their cancer treatment called Optune. So what they wanted to do was to reach out and to help and to give advice and give information for people who are particularly interested in this particular drug, and it's for GBM. It's for wearable glioblastoma, or GBM, and the cancer treatment, as I say, it's Optune. Now, glioblastoma is not one of the regular cancer drugs, so not one of the regular cancer types, I should say. So it's one that there's not much information about. There's not many people that you can speak to and get advice about. There's not many first-person stories that you hear about when you're diagnosed with it. So there's quite a clamour for information and to link in with people who are going through or have been through what it is that you are about to go through yourself or one of your loved ones. So the Facebook Live event got together several people with different perspectives. So a couple of Optune patients and their caregivers and an oncology nurse. And for half an hour, all of those guests told their own stories, their own experiences, their own thoughts, what they've been going through, and their tips and their treatments about how to come through it the other side, together with using this particular drug. They talked about their experiences, what day-to-day life is like with this wearable device. And it came down, the company was saying, about, first of all, finding participants who wanted to take part. That sounds pretty obvious, but of course there's quite a process that you have to go through when you do that, particularly if there aren't many people with glioblastoma for you to talk to in the first place. So first of all, not many patients. Secondly, do you know who they are? Particularly if you're a drugs company, you may not know who it is that your drugs are actually being given to and being sold to and being shared with. Number three, the delicacy of approaching them. Number four, are they going to want to speak anyway publicly about what they're going through? Number five, are they going to be a, inverted commas, good speaker? Are they going to be fluent, but also authentic at the same time? Are they going to suddenly pull out at the last minute? And from my broadcasting background, you know, all of these kinds of things go through your mind as you are fixing up a guest, particularly for a story such as this, or an incident or a situation such as this, which is a little bit more careful, a little bit more personal, talking about people's health. What they did, and what we wouldn't do in a new situation, but what they did here is rehearse those guests. They actually wrote a script for them, which was in their own language. So I'm guessing some kind of pre-interview happened so that those participants were talking to them, notes were taken, and then they essentially scripted. How much of that was scripted rather than bullet points, I don't know. But they had a particular issue, it being a drugs company, that the words, the form of words, what people were saying had to be approved by the regulatory bodies, the legal team at Novacure, because they couldn't allow people to go, well, off script, quite literally, and talk about things and use phrases and terms that wouldn't be appropriate with those kinds of regulations. So they did a pre-interview. They wrote a script. They were sent the script about 10 days in advance. They were talked through the script over Skype. Then there was a second live rehearsal the day before the Facebook Live, when everyone came together in the same room, and then a final rehearsal the morning before the event as well. Now, this article says we were very careful not to over-rehearse. That sounds like an awful lot of rehearsal to me. Essentially, that is four rehearsals, the three main ones, and that pre-interview as well. But the event, as they are very careful to say in this article, which is well worth reading, they needed to meet the FDA's regulatory standards. They had to share some certain information. Things like side effects, safety information, the major risks and so on. And obviously there are different rules and regulations about how you would do this in different areas and different countries around the world. And the moderator, the host, the presenter, if you like, took on the role of the expert, and they actually put those risks and the safety information and so on throughout that 30-minute stream. Okay, sounds really, really useful, sounds really helpful. What are the stats? Well, traffic increased more than 1,900% month over month on the Facebook Live event. Within 48 hours, the video had 12,000 views. Well, when you consider that perhaps not many people are following a drugs company, not that many people are actually going to have a vested interest in watching that kind of information. They are really pleased with those stats. They're planning another Facebook Live event in the future to do something very, very similar. We talked about amplifying your message quite a lot. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago on the programme. So what Novacure did was they actually partnered with various other patient groups, advocacy groups and so on to amplify the event so they could share that within their own communities as well. And they say, all in all, Krishna, it's another way for them to get that kind of information out to GBM patients. They want to leverage every single channel to spread the word. Yes, of course, they've got a vested interest in selling more drugs, but also they want to help people come to terms with how they can live their lives with this and how this particular drug may be able to help. Now, I've mentioned this drug several times. Obviously, from my own background, if this is something which interests you and is appertains to your situation, obviously go and seek a professional advice. And I know nothing about this drug. I am not a doctor. I'm merely talking about it as a case study for a live stream. But this particular company says that we're not done with this platform and what this platform can do for our brand awareness as well. Really interesting way how they've broken it down in this article from MMM Online.
And I know that a lot of people here are watching and they're in the US, so we really appreciate you joining us from the US. You might find that you can easily access the Facebook page. I have checked and I cannot access the page, so it might be just restricted in terms of geolocation. So it wasn't just the live stream I couldn't access to review it, but actually I couldn't, at the time when I was looking at it, I couldn't actually just access the Facebook page either, unless I do some things to change my location settings. But if you are in the US, you might want to check that out. And you might be working again with people who are kind of looking at using live communications from perspective of actually in pharmaceuticals, a regulated industry. So I can understand why they did that. We had a great case study a few years ago, didn't we, Peter, from the Mayo Clinic, and we actually had fantastic insights in terms of what they did for managing risk and so on. And it was actually a live stream of a friend of mine, the person who heads up social media for the and the whole education program around social media for the Mayo Clinic, and it was a live colonoscopy, so a slightly different approach, but again they had to put some work into managing risk and so on. And of course it might be that you are interested in it for other reasons, so we hope that's an interesting story for you, and there will be a link at the end of the show with all of the archived content. What you heard there in the background was Peter's clock going off in terms of telling us that our 30 minutes are up. So I'm going to go swiftly through this next piece of content. And it's actually, I didn't realize this organization had actually had a name change, but I actually have been following Burson for many years in terms of really good research that they do. And actually their name now is Burson, Cohn and Wolfe. So that's why it hadn't initially got my attention. But this is fantastic research about the use of Facebook in its broader sense by the world's leaders. So if you are working in politics, if you're working in government, if you're working with organizations who've got an interest in that area, maybe local government, I think you're going to be interested in this content. Now, there's a fantastic report that you can actually download. I actually just took out little parts of it, particularly in terms of the world leaders and their use of Facebook Live. I'm not going to go through every one of them. I've got just the top headlines for you. As at the March of 2018, the governments and leaders of 175 countries had an official presence on Facebook, with 91% of the 193 UN member states actually being represented there. Of all the types of content that was generated on those Facebook pages or the Facebook profiles, doesn't matter which, guess what? Live video generated the most likes, comments and shares. That is no surprise, is it, if you've actually been using live video or you've been actually watching us here on Livestream Insiders, because we report on that time and again. Almost half of the 650 pages that were reviewed, so that's what the report covers from Burson, Cohn and Wolfe. The report covers 650 pages, and over half of them had actually done live video. The Communications Office of the President of the Philippines had posted 1,065 live broadcasts that had generated 47 million views. That surprised me. I didn't expect it to be the Philippines. And we've actually talked about lots of countries and live video in the past, but it just seems that that's really been working for them. I've actually got lots of dear friends and family friends who are from the Philippines, so I probably need to have a conversation with them about whether they've watched them and what they think of them. What the report goes on to talk about is the fact that Facebook live videos tend to garner the most interactions, with views commenting in terms of as people kind of are watching that live stream. The first Facebook live interview of Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro had actually had the most comments. 234,998 comments. Boy, that must have been hard to actually watch those comments on that live stream if you were trying to manage that at all. And it actually had the most negative reactions, with over 92,000 angry emojis. So that's interesting in terms of the stat of the most comments and the most angry emojis for that live stream. Most of the live streams that are done from Facebook Live are actually done in terms of on pages actually managed by the world leader, or in fact they're posting on their timelines their own personal profiles. It actually is managed very often by the social media teams of those organizations, for those world leaders. But there are a couple of exceptions. So they go on in the article to talk about New Zealand's Prime Minister actually had often been posting thoughtful and impromptu live broadcasts from her home at the Premier House, or even from her car. I hope she wasn't streaming and driving, updating about the latest government decisions and answering questions as they came in live. And the Danish Prime Minister has actually been occasionally taking his smartphone in his hands and actually posting live videos. I think that's a really interesting review that you might want to have a look at, a case study in terms of how world leaders, how people in those kind of positions are using Facebook generally. Of course, we just were interested specifically for this show around the use of live video. As I said, you'll be able to get a link to more information about that report at the end of the show, where I'll post it. One other thing that I should probably mention, and we're honoured that Livestream Insiders has actually been recognised for the Streaming Awards. If you're not familiar with the Streaming Awards, they're hosted by and supported by PTZ Optics, the camera guys, and this is the second year of the awards. And if you are in the world of live streaming and you watch a lot of live videos, you might want to head over to have a look at what's going on there. I found out by accident when I actually was watching a live stream, or a play of it, I can't remember which, from PTZ Optics last week. And so we're delighted that Livestream Insiders have been referenced in there, and particularly in terms of we knew nothing about it. So it was thank you, whoever you are, that actually referenced us. It's against my name in terms of for that nomination. But if you go to streamingawards.com/vote, you can vote on your mobile, you can vote on your desktop, you can decide on the amount of points. There's some great live streamers. I've given my votes. I've cast my votes there for a number of people who are well known in the live streaming world. And actually, what I always find interesting is to see some names that I perhaps am not aware of. So I actually got a few names and a few live streams to actually be going back and taking a look at that will be of interest to me, and maybe some new people to follow. So if you are interested in live video, go ahead and support PTZ Optics. In fact, I understand there's prizes that can even be won for people who are voting. And if you're in the US, I think they've going to have their studio open for people to actually participating in the awards live. More of that on the streamingawards.com website. And to vote, go to streamingawards.com/vote. Thank you so much for your vote for Livestream Insiders.
Absolutely. So please vote. I don't know how many times you can do it, but certainly once, and all the details will be available just after the show. Thank you so much indeed for watching, whether you're watching live or whether you're watching the replay on whichever channel as well. Thank you for that. Don't forget to spread the word. And if it was you that nominated Livestream Insiders for the award, really, really appreciate it. Thanks so much indeed. You know what? It's depth, isn't it? Not width that matters in this game. Yes, we often talk about huge numbers, but you know what? Sometimes smaller numbers of viewers with a niche interest in something is actually more valuable than people just showing a bit of a passing interest, even though there may be more of them. You know, it's horses for courses, horses for courses. But we really appreciate the loan of your eyes and ears over the last 35, 40 minutes or so. Thanks very much indeed. We'll be back in another 7 days to do it all over again, but with one distinct difference. All of the information will be new, because what we do is review the last 7 days of live streaming news, bring you great case studies, tech updates from the world of live streaming. We do that every 7 days. We do it in round about 30 minutes, so you can juggle your Sunday, and we call ourselves Livestream Insiders. Thanks so much indeed for watching. Have a great week.